Let me be honest with you about something. Before I booked this trip, I told almost nobody. Not because I was being mysterious or cool about it. Because every single time I mentioned Pakistan to anyone, the reaction was the same. Eyes going slightly wide, a pause, and then some version of, "Are you sure that's a good idea?" My mother called me twice in one evening. A friend sent me 3 news articles without any message attached, just the links, which I thought was a very efficient way of expressing concern. My travel insurance company asked me more questions about this destination than they had asked about any other country I had ever visited, including a specific question about whether I intended to travel near any international borders, which I found both thorough and slightly dramatic. I went anyway, partly because I had already paid for the flight, partly because every person I found online who had actually been to Pakistan said the same thing, which was that it was nothing like what the news suggested and that they wanted to go back immediately. I decided to find out for myself, and I want to tell you what I found, honestly and in order, starting from the moment I landed. The airport in Lahore is not a large or particularly fancy airport, but something happened there that set the tone for everything that followed. I was standing at the baggage carousel looking confused, which is my default expression in airports, trying to find the right belt for my flight. A man I had never seen before, a fellow passenger who owed me absolutely nothing, walked over, asked which flight I was on, found the right belt, pointed me toward it, and then walked away without waiting for thanks or making any kind of deal about it. That was it. That was the whole interaction. But it was the first of many moments in Pakistan where someone helped me simply because I needed help, with no transaction involved and no expectation of anything in return. My driver to the hotel was a man named Asif, who had a very old car, a very loud music system, and a personality that filled both completely. About 15 minutes into the drive, he suddenly pulled off the main road and stopped in front of a small tea stall without explaining why. He got out, said something to the man behind the stall, and came back with 2 small cups of chai. He handed me one through the window and said, in simple and completely confident English, "You cannot arrive in Lahore without tea." I accepted the tea. It was sweet and spiced and served in a small clay cup that left a faint, earthy taste at the edges. We sat there by the side of the road in the early evening traffic and drank it together, and it was, without any exaggeration, one of the finest welcomes I have ever received in any country, anywhere. Lahore is a city that has been important for a very long time and knows it. It was a major city under the Mughal Empire, which ruled much of South Asia from the 16th to the 18th century, and the old walled city at its center still carries that history in its bones. I spent my first full day walking through it, which was one of the more overwhelming and wonderful things I have done. The streets inside the old city are narrow and crowded and loud and full of color. Rickshaws and motorcycles moving through gaps that seem too small for them. Shops open to the street, selling everything from spices to shoes, to enormous pots of food that have clearly been cooking since before I woke up. I found Food Street in the early evening, which is exactly what it sounds like. A street dedicated entirely to food, famous across Pakistan for the quality and variety of what is cooked and sold there. The buildings on both sides are old and grand and lit up in the evening with colored lights. And the smell that fills the street is the combined smell of 100 different dishes being prepared simultaneously, which is a smell that should be bottled and sold because nothing produced by any perfume company has ever been as effective. I sat down at a restaurant and ordered nihari, which is a traditional slow-cooked meat stew that is especially popular in Lahore. Nihari is made by cooking meat on a very low flame for many hours, sometimes overnight, until it becomes so tender it falls apart at the touch and the broth around it becomes rich and deep and flavored in a way that only long, slow cooking can produce. It arrived with naan bread that had come directly from a clay oven, slightly charred at the edges and soft inside, and I used it to eat the nihari the correct way, which is with your hands, which I found both slightly challenging and completely worth it. After dinner, I walked to the Badshahi Mosque, which sits just outside the old city walls, and was built in 1673 by the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. It is one of the largest mosques in the world and can hold tens of thousands of worshippers at one time. I want to try to describe walking into the main courtyard of the Badshahi Mosque in the evening, but I am not sure my vocabulary is up to the task. The courtyard is vast, red sandstone in every direction, 4 minarets rising at the corners to a height that makes you tilt your head back to see the tops. The main prayer hall ahead of you, with its white marble domes catching the last light of the day. Everything about it is designed to make you feel small in the most respectful possible way. It does this very effectively. I stood in the middle of that courtyard for a long time and did not take a single photograph because it seemed like the wrong response to something that large and that old and that genuinely beautiful. The hospitality in Pakistan is something I need to explain properly because it is not like the hospitality in other countries I have visited. In many places, people are friendly and helpful and kind, and that is wonderful. In Pakistan, hospitality operates on a different level entirely. It is not occasional. It is not dependent on mood or circumstance. It is simply what you do for a guest, any guest, without discussion or calculation. I discovered this fully on my second day, when I wandered into a small market area and stopped at a shop selling dried fruits and nuts, which Pakistan produces in enormous quantities and quality. The owner brought out a small plate of samples without being asked. Then he brought tea. We talked for a while, my English and his combining well enough to have a real conversation. When I tried to pay for the tea, he looked at me with an expression of gentle but firm refusal, as if I had suggested something slightly absurd. The tea was not for sale. The tea was just tea. That same afternoon, I was sitting in a park near the old city when a family nearby noticed me and, after a short conversation among themselves, sent their youngest son over to invite me for dinner that evening. Not lunch, dinner, at their home. A family I had met 12 minutes ago was inviting me to their home for dinner. I said yes, because saying no felt both rude and genuinely impossible, and also because something about the directness of the invitation made me trust it completely. I arrived at their home that evening and was taken into a large living room covered in cushions and carpets, where what appeared to be every member of the family had gathered. Grandparents, parents, children, at least 2 people whose relationship to everyone else I never fully established. Food appeared on a large cloth spread on the floor. Dish after dish, more than we could eat, which I later learned is entirely intentional because in Pakistani hospitality, the table must always have more food than the guests can finish, because running out would be unacceptable. I ate things I could not name and was fed things I did not ask for, and had conversations in partial English that somehow covered topics ranging from cricket to education to the price of mangoes in different seasons. 3 hours passed without me noticing. When I left, the mother of the family pressed a small container of homemade pickle into my hands as a gift, and would not hear any argument about it. I carried that pickle all the way home. On day 4, I took a small domestic flight north from Lahore to the town of Gilgit, which sits in the mountains at the far northern edge of Pakistan, near the borders of China and Afghanistan, and the disputed region of Kashmir. I had been told the flight was worth taking for the views alone, and this turned out to be one of the most significant pieces of advice I received on the entire trip. The plane is small and flies low enough relative to the surrounding terrain that what you see from the window is not the distant hazy mountains you see from a normal cruising altitude. What you see is the Karakoram mountain range up close. These are some of the highest mountains on Earth. K2, the second highest peak in the world after Everest, is in this range. Looking at them from a small plane window, I understood immediately and completely why people dedicate years of their lives to climbing them. They are not merely large. They are a different category of thing from everything else on Earth. They are so enormous that they make the concept of enormous seem inadequate. The air when I stepped off the plane in Gilgit was cold and clean and thin in a way that made every breath feel more effortful and more satisfying than normal breathing. I took a jeep from Gilgit along the Karakoram Highway, which is one of the highest paved roads in the world, built jointly by Pakistan and China over 20 years and completed in 1979 at enormous human cost. Running through mountain passes and along river gorges to connect the two countries across some of the most extreme terrain on the planet. The drive to Hunza Valley takes a few hours, and every corner of the road reveals something that makes you want to stop the vehicle and simply stand there for a while. Hunza Valley sits in the mountains, surrounded by peaks on every side, some of them over 7,000 meters high, which is so high that the snow on their upper slopes is permanent, never melting regardless of season. The valley floor is green and terraced with orchards, mostly apricot trees, and in the season when I visited, the apricots were being dried on the flat rooftops of the stone houses, spread out in the sun, turning from orange to a deep amber color. The villages are small and quiet, and the people move through them with the unhurried pace of people who live somewhere that has not changed its fundamental rhythm in a very long time. I sat outside my guest house on the first evening and looked at the mountains and felt the particular silence of a high-altitude valley, which is not the absence of sound but a quality of quiet that feels actively present, like something you could reach out and touch. The next morning I hiked up to a viewpoint above the valley called Eagle's Nest, which takes about 2 hours on a steep path through the orchards and then through open rocky ground, and offers from its top a view of the entire valley below with the mountains arranged around it on every side. I was breathing hard when I arrived at the top, both from the climb and from the altitude, and I sat down on a rock to recover and found that I was not alone. An old man was already sitting there, wrapped in a shawl, looking at the view with the comfortable expression of someone who has looked at this view many times and found it worth looking at every single one of those times. He spoke some English, learned decades ago, he told me, from foreign mountaineers who passed through Hunza on their way to attempt the peaks. We sat together and he pointed at the mountains one by one and told me their names and their heights, and, for some of them, the names of the climbers who had first reached their summits and what had happened to them, because mountain stories do not always have easy endings. He pointed at one peak and said a name I did not recognize, then shook his head slowly, and I understood without needing the rest of the story. We sat in that place for a long time, the valley spread below us, the peaks surrounding us, and I thought that there are very few conversations in life that feel as large as their setting, but this one did. On my last morning in Hunza, I woke early and sat outside in the cold air before the sun had come fully over the eastern peaks. The valley was in shadow still, but the tops of the mountains were already lit, bright white and gold against a sky that at this altitude is a shade of blue that does not exist at sea level. I thought about my mother's phone calls. I thought about the news articles my friend has sent. I thought about the travel insurance questions. And then I thought about Asif stopping by the side of the road to buy me tea because you cannot arrive in Lahore without tea. I thought about the family spreading food on the floor of their living room for a stranger they had met in a park 2 hours earlier. I thought about the old man naming the mountains one by one in the cold morning air at Eagle's Nest. Here is what I want to say directly, without making it poetic or complicated. Every country has a story that the rest of the world tells about it. That story is usually built from news and politics and the loudest and most dramatic things that happen there, because those are the things that travel furthest. Pakistan has a story like that. Most people who have not been there know that story and only that story. But a country is not its loudest moments. A country is the man who finds the right baggage belt for a stranger without being asked. It is the driver who stops for tea. It is the family who opens their home and their table to someone they met in a park. It is the old man on a mountain who remembers the name of every peak and tells them to you one by one. I came to Pakistan not knowing what to expect and left knowing something I could not have learned any other way. The gap between what the world tells you about a place and what a place actually is can be enormous. In Pakistan, that gap was the largest I have ever found, and what was on the other side of it was something I will not forget for a very long time. All right. If you made it through this shadowing session today, that already says something about your discipline. This repetition and consistency combination might look boring on paper, but it is one of the most powerful ways to build fluent, natural English. Keep showing up like this, and your brain will slowly adapt. Trust the process. If this helped even a little, consider liking the video or subscribing. It lets me know these sessions are actually making a difference. We'll catch up again soon. Take care till then.